In the chill of early December 1942, a four-engined giant appeared out of the gray skies above occupied France. It was a Boeing B-17F Flying Fortress, tail number 41-24585, belonging to the U.S. 8th Air Force. On that day, it would become one of the most extraordinary prizes ever captured by the Luftwaffe. For the Germans, it was not just an aircraft, it was a window into the industrial heart of their enemy, a mechanical embodiment of America's wartime potential. Within weeks, this bomber, renamed Wulf Hound, would reveal truths that shocked even Germany's most experienced air tacticians. The story began on December 12, 1942. Lieutenant Paul Flickinger of the 360th Bomb Squadron, 303rd Bomb Group, was flying a routine mission over Rouen when his aircraft sustained damage from German fighters and flak. With one engine knocked out, another coughing smoke, and fuel rapidly disappearing, he turned west in search of the English Channel. But heavy cloud, poor navigation, and further mechanical trouble doomed the return. Instead of England, Flickinger's B-17 limped deeper into German-occupied France. With his crew wounded and the fortress barely holding altitude, he made the decision to land. The big bomber touched down in a field near Melun, southeast of Paris, intact but stranded. Within hours, German troops surrounded the downed aircraft. Amazingly, the bomber had suffered only superficial damage. Flickinger and his surviving crew were captured. The plane itself, though, was far more valuable. Local Luftwaffe officers recognized instantly what they had found: a complete, flyable B-17, one of America's most advanced bombers, delivered into their hands without a scratch. The aircraft was quickly dismantled and transported by rail to Rechlin Airfield, the Luftwaffe's top-secret test and evaluation center on Lake Müritz, north of Berlin. Here, Germany's best engineers and test pilots examined Allied technology, searching for advantages or vulnerabilities. Rechlin was a remarkable place. It was the German equivalent of Britain's Farnborough or America's Wright Field, a scientific and engineering hub devoted to pushing aviation to its limits. The airfield was run by the Erprobungsstelle Rechlin, the central Luftwaffe test establishment, where captured aircraft were studied with forensic precision. Engineers compared metallurgy, instrument layout, fuel systems, and aerodynamics. Among the test pilots assigned to the project was Hauptmann Hans-Werner Lerche, an exceptional aviator with nerves of steel and an encyclopedic knowledge of aircraft handling. Lerche had flown virtually every type of airplane in the Reich's possession: fighters, bombers, prototypes, even enemy aircraft. The arrival of a fully intact B-17 was an event unlike any other. When the disassembled components of 41-24585 arrived at Rechlin, mechanics and engineers swarmed over them with awe and curiosity. They noted the exceptional build quality, the robust Boeing rivet work, the redundancy in electrical and hydraulic systems, and the practical layout of crew stations. To German eyes accustomed to finely tuned but resource-limited aircraft, the American bomber seemed both crude and magnificent. Everything about it was overbuilt: the armor plates, the self-sealing fuel tanks, the vast control surfaces. It looked heavy, even clumsy, but the craftsmanship was undeniable. Most surprising was the quantity of armament. 13.5 caliber Browning M2 machine guns bristled from its turrets and windows, each capable of firing 13 rounds per second. Collectively, they could unleash more than 160 rounds per second, enough to fill the air around the bomber with lead. Lerche's first task was to make the B-17 fly again. The mechanics reassembled the aircraft, repaired the minor damage, and repainted it in Luftwaffe markings. The swastika appeared on the tail, the Balkenkreuz on the wings, and the bomber was given its new German identity, DL plus XC, with the nickname Wulf Hound. The name was a play on words, partly derived from the 303rd Bomb Group's own moniker, Hell's Angels, and partly from the German word wolf, an animal admired for cunning and tenacity. For the next months, Wulf Hound would become a test bed and later even an operational decoy. When Lerche took the controls for the first test flight, he was struck by how smooth and balanced the massive aircraft felt. The engines, 4 Wright Cyclone R1820-97s, delivered steady power with an almost effortless throttle response. Compared with German bombers like the H-111 or Ju-88, the Flying Fortress felt stable and reassuring. Its climb rate and service ceiling impressed the Luftwaffe engineers. Its ability to hold formation and absorb punishment astonished them. The cockpit ergonomics, though cluttered by German standards, were practical and intuitive. Every system had backups. The crew enjoyed armored seats and heated flight suits. Even the oxygen distribution and radio intercom were superior to anything in the Luftwaffe's service. But what stunned Lerche and his colleagues most was the B-17's defensive design philosophy. German bombers of the time relied on speed, altitude, and escorting fighters for protection. American designers, by contrast, had created a bomber that was its own fortress, a gun platform bristling with firepower from every direction. The test pilots simulated attack runs to study its blind spots and found there were almost none. Frontal attacks were the only realistic option, but even these carried enormous risk. The nose-mounted twin Brownings, combined with the top and chin turrets, made head-on approaches deadly. The Luftwaffe realized that traditional tail-chasing tactics, standard for German fighter units, would simply not work against massed formations of B-17s. The captured bomber became a classroom on wings. Lerche conducted numerous flights, sometimes with other test pilots flying Bf-190s and FW-190s alongside, performing mock attack sequences. They analyzed the gun arcs, the synchronization of the defensive positions, and the psychological effect of attacking a machine that seemed to vomit fire from every angle. The data was compiled into reports for the Reichsluftfahrt Ministry, the Air Ministry, which disseminated tactical guidance to frontline fighter groups. The conclusion was chilling. Frontal assaults, coordinated and fast, offered the best hope of success, but even then, losses would be severe. This research directly influenced the development of new Luftwaffe tactics in 1943. Pilots like Hauptmann Egon Mayer, commanding 3 of Kampfgeschwader 2 Richthofen, studied the Rechlin data and began to pioneer head-on attacks against bomber formations. Mayer reasoned that the B-17's defensive arcs were weakest at the very front between the top and chin turrets, where split-second timing might allow a fighter to deliver a burst before the bomber's guns could respond effectively. These tactics proved partially successful, but required extraordinary courage. Flying straight into the guns of a fortress at closing speeds over 600 kilometers per hour left almost no margin for error. Many Luftwaffe pilots died attempting it. Yet for a time, Mayer's innovations helped stem the tide of daylight bombing.
Meanwhile, Lerche continued flying the Wulf Hound under increasingly dangerous conditions. Allied raids grew larger every month, and Rechlin itself became a potential target. On several occasions, Lerche demonstrated the captured aircraft to senior officers, including General Adolf Galland, the inspector of fighters. Galland was deeply impressed by the B-17's durability and systems engineering. During one inspection, he reportedly remarked that if Germany had such an aircraft, they would have conquered the skies. But more than admiration, Galland saw a sobering truth. Every B-17 represented not only a technological marvel, but also a statement of industrial capacity. America was building these machines by the thousands, 12,731 in total before the war's end, produced not only by Boeing, but also by Douglas and Vega, who built them under license with precision-engineered interchangeability. For a nation like Germany, whose factories struggled under Allied bombing and resource shortages, such output was unimaginable. The lessons from Wulf Hound echoed through the Luftwaffe's command structure. Reports circulated warning that Germany could not win in industrial war against the United States. Galland later wrote in his memoirs that the day he saw the captured B-17 at Rechlin was the day he realized the war was lost, not because of tactics or bravery, but because of production numbers. Every fortress shot down could be replaced within days. Every German loss represented months of irreplaceable manpower and material. The strategic balance was already tilting irrevocably. As the Rechlin evaluations continued, the Wulf Hound's role expanded. The Luftwaffe transferred the aircraft to Kampfgeschwader 200, or KG-200, the shadowy Special Operations Unit tasked with clandestine missions. KG-200 used captured Allied aircraft for infiltration, reconnaissance, and deception. Painted with German markings, Wulf Hound could, in theory, approach Allied formations or bases without arousing immediate suspicion. There are fragmentary accounts suggesting it was used to train anti-aircraft batteries and radar operators in recognizing Allied profiles, and possibly for propaganda films. Some reports even hint at attempted infiltration flights, though evidence is scarce. What is certain is that the bomber continued to fly under German control well into 1944. Hans-Werner Lerche's own recollections of Wulf Hound, preserved in his post-war memoir, Luftwaffe Test Pilot, offer a vivid picture. He described the aircraft as a triumph of rugged simplicity, marveling at its ability to withstand punishment and remain airborne with multiple engines shot out. He recalled simulated battle runs where he would deliberately shut down engines or extend the landing gear mid-flight to study performance degradation. The Fortress, he wrote, flew as if it wished to keep its crew alive. German aircraft, optimized for performance, were often fragile in comparison. The B-17 sacrificed elegance for survivability. To Lerche, it symbolized a fundamentally different design philosophy, one rooted in America's belief in mass production, crew protection, and long-range firepower. In the months following its capture, the data collected from Wulf Hound not only influenced tactics, but also German research into bomber interception technology. Engineers at Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf experimented with heavy-armed variants like the Bf-110G2 and FW-191A6R6, mounting 20mm and 30mm cannons specifically calibrated for attacking flying fortresses. The Luftwaffe even explored air-to-air rockets, such as the Werfer Granate 21, which allowed fighters to fire salvos from outside the B-17's lethal defensive envelope. These innovations all stemmed in part from the realization, thanks to Rechlin's tests, that the American bomber's defenses made close-range engagements suicidal.
By the summer of 1943, the full-scale air war over Europe was raging. Thousands of flying fortresses streamed daily toward targets deep inside the Reich. The Luftwaffe fought valiantly, developing new tactics and deploying experimental weapons, but it was fighting a losing battle. Each mission cost Germany precious aircraft and pilots. Even as they shot down dozens of bombers, more would arrive the next week. For the German pilots who had seen the Rechlin reports, the statistics were demoralizing. They knew that behind every B-17 was an assembly line in Seattle, Long Beach, or Burbank working around the clock. Back at Rechlin, Wulf Hound itself was showing signs of wear. Constant test flights and limited spare parts made maintenance increasingly difficult. The Luftwaffe's fuel shortages grew acute, and priority shifted to front-line units. By early 1944, the aircraft was grounded, awaiting repairs that never came. Records suggest it was later moved to a dispersal area near Brandenburg, where it may have been destroyed in an Allied air raid. Some fragments were recovered after the war, but the bomber itself disappeared, its fate symbolic of the collapsing Luftwaffe. After the war, Allied intelligence teams investigating captured aircraft facilities discovered detailed German reports on the B-17F. These documents confirmed much of what post-war historians would later piece together, that the tests at Rechlin had a profound influence on German aerial tactics. They also revealed the extent of German admiration for American engineering. One translated report concluded bluntly, "The flying fortress is built not only to fight, but to survive. It represents a philosophy alien to our industry, but perfectly suited to a nation of vast resources." Another noted that the psychological effect of this aircraft on our fighter pilots is considerable. Its defensive fire is intense and effective. Hans-Werner Lerche survived the war and continued to fly as a civilian test pilot. His wartime experiences, especially with captured Allied aircraft, became invaluable to post-war aviation research. When interviewed by Allied investigators, he spoke candidly of the respect he held for American aircraft design and for the men who flew them. To him, the capture of the B-17 was a turning point, not only in understanding the enemy, but in recognizing the scale of what Germany faced. "In that airplane," he said, "we saw America itself, powerful, methodical, and tireless." The story of Wulf Hound encapsulates the technological and industrial contrasts that defined World War II. On one side stood Germany, brilliant but resource-constrained, relying on innovation and skilled craftsmanship. On the other stood the United States, with an economy that could outproduce the Axis tenfold, applying mass production to machines of war with assembly line precision. The B-17 embodied that difference. Every rivet, every redundant wire harness, every overlapping armor plate spoke of an industrial system designed not for scarcity, but for abundance. To the Germans, it was almost incomprehensible. Even the psychological impact of the flying fortress rippled beyond Rechlin. Luftwaffe pilots who survived encounters with B-17 formations often described the terrifying experience of flying through what seemed like a solid wall of tracers. 13 guns, manned by 10 crew members working in perfect coordination, could blanket an attacking fighter with deadly fire before it came within 300 meters. Lerche's tests quantified that firepower. 160 rounds per second from synchronized defensive positions. For every German fighter pilot, that statistic became a grim reminder of the odds stacked against them.
Meanwhile, in the United States, production ramped higher. Boeing's factories in Seattle and Wichita operated 24 hours a day. Women riveters, immortalized as Rosie the Riveter, assembled wings and fuselages while convoys of trucks carried engines, guns, and instruments from subcontractors nationwide. By 1944, a new B-17 rolled off an American production line every 63 minutes. This industrial miracle dwarfed anything Germany could match. Galland's grim realization at Rechlin that material superiority would decide the war proved prophetic. As Allied bombing campaigns intensified, the Luftwaffe's ability to respond deteriorated. Fuel shortages, pilot attrition, and overwhelming enemy numbers shattered what remained of Germany's air defense. The very aircraft that had once been dissected and studied at Rechlin now returned in swarms to obliterate German factories and cities. It was a cruel irony. The engineers who had once admired the B-17's construction were now hiding from its bombs. When Berlin finally fell in 1945, the story of Wulf Hound slipped into obscurity. Post-war aviation historians rediscovered it through fragmentary records and Lerche's memoirs. The serial number 4124585 reappeared in U.S. Army Air Forces archives, marked as captured by enemy forces. Later interviews with surviving members of the 303rd Bomb Group confirmed the aircraft's identity and the crew's fate as prisoners of war. The legend of Wulf Hound grew from there, symbolizing a rare moment when technology transcended national boundaries, when admiration and respect coexisted with bitter conflict. The lessons drawn from Rechlin's analysis influenced post-war aviation on both sides. The Allies studied German reports to refine bomber defenses, while post-war jet designers on both continents absorbed the value of redundancy and durability. The idea that a combat aircraft could be both heavily armed and long-ranged, able to sustain immense damage and still return home, carried forward into the Cold War era. In this sense, Wulf Hound's legacy extended far beyond 1942.
Yet, perhaps the most striking aspect of the story lies not in engineering, but in perspective. For the men at Rechlin, pilots, engineers, and generals, the captured B-17 was more than a machine. It was a revelation about the nature of total war. They saw in its riveted skin the sheer weight of a nation's industrial base, the coordination of factories, railroads, and workers united toward a single goal. It showed them that wars are not won solely by bravery or tactical brilliance, but by the relentless capacity to build, replace, and endure. The B-17 was not invincible, but the system that produced it nearly was. In the end, the tale of Wulf Hound is a microcosm of the Second World War itself. A single aircraft, captured by chance, became a lens through which Germany glimpsed its own limitations. The tests at Rechlin revealed not only the technical superiority of certain American systems, but the overwhelming might of the Allied industrial machine. From Flickinger's fateful emergency landing near Melun to Galland's sober reflections on the impossibility of victory, the arc of this story mirrors the trajectory of the entire conflict. Early confidence, shocking discovery, and eventual realization of defeat. Today, historians view Wulf Hound as one of the most significant captured aircraft of the war. While other Allied planes, P-51 Mustangs, P-47 Thunderbolts, even a B-24 Liberator also fell into German hands, none had such a profound influence on enemy tactics and strategic thought. The meticulous testing by Hans-Werner Lerche and his colleagues provided the Luftwaffe with invaluable data, but it also delivered a sobering message that technology and courage could not compensate for the imbalance in industrial power. Standing on the windswept tarmac at Rechlin in 1943, Lerche could not have known that his flights in Wulf Hound would one day symbolize the turning point in the air war.
Yet in hindsight, those test flights were more than scientific exercises. They were harbingers of the future. Each engine run, each simulated attack, each detailed report marked another step in Germany's reluctant understanding that the war in the air had already been lost. The flying fortress, once feared as a weapon, became instead a mirror reflecting the truth of modern warfare, that victory belongs to those who can outbuild, outlast, and outfly their enemies. And so the story of the captured B-17F Wulf Hound remains a testament to how one aircraft, born of American industry, tested by German engineers, and remembered by historians, helped shape the course of the air war over Europe. Its guns, its armor, and its sheer presence in the skies told a story that no propaganda could erase. That behind every fortress was a nation whose arsenal of democracy would ultimately decide the fate of the world.